Welcome back to Marginal Thoughts. We're so glad you're here with us. Have you ever scrolled through social media, seen someone jet setting or talking about living life on their own terms and thought, how do they do it? And maybe more importantly, how can I do that? We all kind of dream of that moment when work becomes a choice, right? Not something you have to do. But for so many of us, that feels like a far off fantasy. Maybe a number so big it's just overwhelming to even think about. Well, today we're cutting through the noise and getting straight to the numbers. We've been looking at some really practical insights on what it actually takes to stop working, whether you're planning decades ahead or, maybe feeling like you need to catch up. Forget the guesswork because we're going to try and lay out exactly what you might need by different ages, how realistic those timelines are, and perhaps most importantly, why the journey is often, well, easier than you think if you simply start. So, if you've ever wondered how much money you truly need to achieve financial freedom and maybe never have to work again, this exploration is definitely for you. Let's unpack this. So, what's the big secret then? How do we figure out that magic number?
Well, it turns out there's a pretty widely accepted principle that helps map this out. It gives you a framework for how much you need to save to potentially never have to work again.
Okay.
What's fascinating here is that the foundation comes from something called the 4% rule. You might have heard of it,
Vaguely, yeah. The 4% rule.
right? This benchmark was developed by a financial planner, William Bengen. And essentially, it suggests that if you save up enough money, you can sustainably withdraw about 4% of it each year, and your savings should, in theory, last for the rest of your life. Later on, a group of college professors in Texas actually confirmed this with their own research, the Trinity study.
Okay, so the 4% rule. What does this actually mean for someone just starting to think about this stuff? How does it work in practice?
It's actually quite straightforward once you break it down.
Okay.
First, you need to estimate your annual expenses for when you stop working, what you think you'll need per year.
Right, like what your lifestyle will cost.
Exactly. Let's just say, for an example, you think you'll need $40,000 per year.
Okay, $40,000.
Second, you multiply that yearly spending by 25.
25. Why 25?
Good question. Because withdrawing 4% each year means you need a savings total that's 25 times your annual spending. 4% is 1/25th of the total.
Okay, got it. The math checks out.
So for that $40,000 a year, you need $1 million saved. That's your target number.
1 million.
Third, you invest your money, usually in low-cost, diversified funds. Think index funds, ETFs, things like that. And fourth, once you hit your target, that $1 million in this case, you start withdrawing that 4%, your $40,000, and you adjust it slightly each year for inflation, so your spending power keeps up.
That sounds manageable on paper, I guess. But I bet the real challenge is hitting those savings targets, right? Especially if you want to stop working earlier than, say, 65 or 70.
Absolutely. And this raises a really important question. When you start saving makes a colossal difference, a huge difference.
Okay.
The earlier you begin, the more the market does the heavy lifting for you. It's all about the power of compounding.
Right, that snowball effect I've heard about.
To act like a snowball. Your money earns returns, and then those returns start earning their own returns. It accelerates. If you wait, you have to do a lot more of the work yourself. You end up needing to save significantly larger amounts each month just to catch up.
Okay, that makes sense. So let's get into the specifics then. What does this look like at different ages? And, what kind of life can you realistically expect?
Let's break it down. We'll start with option 1, stopping work around 70. This is kind of the foundational target. Let's aim for about $250,000 here.
$250,000 by 70. Okay. What does that life look like?
This is really the minimum target for a, let's call it, semi-comfortable lifestyle at the latest traditional retirement age. Lifestyle-wise, you'd cover the basics. Think rent for a small place, or maybe you own your home outright by then. Groceries, electricity, the essentials. You could probably manage short, local trips, maybe once or twice a year, especially during off-peak times. Healthcare would likely depend heavily on state-sponsored programs, like Medicare in the U.S., or similar systems elsewhere. Anything extra needs careful budgeting.
So, stable, but not exactly luxurious.
Precisely. Every dollar has a purpose.
Yeah.
You wouldn't feel totally secure, perhaps, but not unsafe either. It's about managing.
Okay. So what's the savings reality? How hard is it to hit that $250,000?
Well, this is where time really shows its power. If you only start saving at age 65, you'd need to stash away around $3,500 every single month to hit $250K by 70.
Wow. $3,500 a month for 5 years. That's steep.
It's a huge chunk of change, right? Now, compare that. If you start way back at age 25,
Okay.
You'd only need to save about $66 a month.
$66.
$66, that's it.
That's it. Assuming a reasonable market return, like 7% average after inflation, that $66 is maybe one dinner out, just quietly working for you, compounding for decades.
That's incredible. The difference is staggering.
Isn't it? Even starting later, say at 45, it's about $399 a month. Still heavier, but potentially within reach for many.
The message is definitely clear. Start early if you possibly can. Absolutely. The earlier you start, the less painful the savings rate is. The market handles more of it. Okay, option 2. Let's aim for stepping back a bit earlier, say at 60. Target here is $500,000.
Okay, 500K by 60, so leaving work before the traditional age.
Right. You're close enough to potential state support systems like Social Security in the U.S. or government pensions, but you're not relying on them immediately. They might kick in around 62, 65, 67, depending on where you are, and help fill part of the gap later.
So what does life look like with $500,000 at 60? Does it feel more comfortable?
Definitely more manageable. You could likely afford a comfortable home, maybe run a small, reliable car. You can eat well at home, enjoy the occasional meal out without too much stress.
Sounds nice. What about travel?
Maybe a decent trip once a year. You'd still be mindful of spending, naturally, but you wouldn't feel constantly squeezed. There's some breathing room.
And healthcare. Still a concern.
It still depends heavily on where you live. In countries with private coverage, yeah, you definitely still need to set money aside or budget carefully for premiums and cost before government programs might start.
So it's security, maybe not outright luxury, but a noticeable step up in control.
Exactly. It makes a huge difference in your day-to-day feeling of security and choice.
And the savings needed for that $500K by 60, let's use that 7% return again.
Okay. Starting at 25, you'd need to save $278 a month. Still very manageable if started early.
Okay.
Start at 35, though, and it jumps up to $677 a month. More significant.
Right.
And by 45, that gap gets much bigger. You're looking at needing $577 a month.
Over $1,500 a month. That's starting to require some serious prioritizing.
It really does. Again, it highlights the cost of waiting. All right, option 3. Retiring even earlier, at 50. Now we're talking about enjoying freedom quite a bit younger. Target, $750,000.
Wow, 50. That's young enough to really enjoy it, but yeah, that money needs to last a long time.
Exactly. At 50, your savings need to cover potentially 35, 40 years, maybe more, before any state support might begin. It's all on you.
So $750,000, what lifestyle does that support for potentially 4 decades?
It gives you a fair amount of stability. You could likely own or rent a decent home in an average cost of living area, run a reliable car, cover daily needs without much stress.
Okay, travel, hobbies.
Well-planned annual trips are definitely possible. Think planned vacations, not spontaneous luxury jaunts. You can afford decent health care, but again, private services need careful budgeting.
So there's breathing room, but you still need to be disciplined.
Absolutely. You won't feel rich, probably, but you shouldn't feel constrained either, as long as you avoid major overspending or taking big investment risks. It's about sustainable freedom.
Makes sense. So what's the savings path to $750K by 50?
Starting at 25, again, time is your friend. You'd need to invest $416 a month.
Okay, 416. Still feels doable if you're focused early on.
It is significant, but compounding does most of the work over those 25 years. But if you start at 35, now you're really playing catch-up. You need $926 a month, over $11,000 a year.
Getting tougher. Requires a good income or serious frugality.
For sure. And if you wait until 45, it jumps sharply to $2,366 a month.
Whoa. Nearly $2,400 a month. That's over $28,000 a year just in savings.
Yeah, at that point, it becomes very challenging unless you have a very high income and low expenses.
Right.
And trying to start at 50 to retire at 50?
Forget about it.
Pretty much. You'd need to save a staggering $4,333 a month for those last few years, which is just likely unrealistic for almost anyone. The difference that starting point makes is just massive. Okay, let's push it even further. Option 4 is stepping away at 45. That's 2 decades before many people even think about it. Target, $875,000.
45. Wow. Okay, so no government pension, no subsidized health care for, what, 15, 20 years? Everything comes from savings.
Everything. It requires a really well-structured, independent life. Conscious spending is key. You'd likely need to follow a pretty strict withdrawal rate, maybe 3%, perhaps 3.5%, maybe 4% if you're optimistic, to allow the rest to keep growing.
So living on maybe $30,000, $35,000 a year from that $875K?
Roughly, yes. That kind of budget means maybe living in a paid-off home or a very affordable rental, handling bills, groceries, running a reliable but not fancy car.
can you still have some fun? Hobbies? Travel.
Yeah, you budget for hobbies or occasional sturges, maybe one decent trip a year, carefully planned. But there's really no room for major mistakes or big unexpected expenses without adjusting significantly. Discipline is paramount.
Sounds like you need to be really intentional. So hitting 875K by 45, what's the commitment level?
It's significant, and it requires starting early and being consistent. From age 25, you'd need to invest $1,680 a month.
$1,680 a month. Yearly $20,000 a year, starting right out of college, basically.
Yes, it demands a lean lifestyle from the get-go. No new cars every few years, probably a modest home or apartment, budget travel, keeping debt extremely low or non-existent. Your social life can't revolve around constant spending.
You have to live like you're already financially free, in a way. Frugally.
That's a great way to put it. You need to adopt that mindset early. If you start later, say at 35, the numbers get pretty extreme fast. You're looking at $5,555 a month.
Over $5,500 a month. Wow.
Yeah, over $66,000 a year just for investments. And starting at 40, it's basically off the table for most people. You'd need $12,222 a month for just those last 5 years.
$12,000 a month. Yeah, that's intense.
It's not something you just stumble into. It has to be intentionally built brick by brick for decades.
Yeah.
Okay, finally, the ultimate freedom goal for many early retirement folks. Retiring at 35. Target, $1.25 million.
35. That's a different life entirely. You could have 50, 60 years ahead of you.
Exactly. This is a full life decision, not just a career break. Your savings literally become your paycheck for life.
$1.25 million. What kind of lifestyle does that actually support long term?
You could probably reasonably withdraw around $45,000 to $50,000 a year. Again, depends on market returns and your withdrawal strategy. This supports a lean, intentional life, a modest paid-off home or low-cost living situation. Basic bills, groceries, a few affordable hobbies.
Travel?
Budget travel, yes. Maybe slow travel, off-season trips. Success here depends less on the amount you saved and more on your ability to stick to the disciplined lifestyle that allowed you to save it in the first place.
Right. You can't suddenly inflate your lifestyle.
Absolutely not. And healthcare is a massive factor here. If you're in a place with expensive private healthcare, you need a rock-solid plan for that maybe built into your withdrawal, maybe a separate fund, maybe planning to live somewhere cheaper. It needs serious thought.
Okay, so the number to hit $1.25 million by 35, I'm almost afraid to ask, starting at 25.
It requires extreme commitment. Starting at 25, you need to invest $7,222 every single month.
$7,200 every month for 10 years straight.
Every single month. That's over $86,000 a year just in investments, which means your income has to be significantly higher than that just to live.
So this path requires, well, obsession.
Pretty much. It means a life that looks very different from your peers. No expensive apartments, no new cars, no shopping for fun, probably minimal eating out, very low overhead, near zero debt, and absolutely zero lifestyle inflation as your income hopefully grows.
High income, extreme savings rate.
Yes. Likely requires a high-paying career path. Tech, finance, medicine, successful entrepreneurship, combined with that extreme frugality. It's not for everyone, clearly. But if you are willing to go all in really early and just block out all the societal pressure to spend.
You buy yourself decades of time.
Decades of freedom. Freedom to choose how you spend every single day. That's the real payoff. Seeing that freedom is the ultimate flex, not the fancy car.
Wow. These numbers really paint a picture. Beyond just the figures, though, what's the underlying message here? What should people really take away from this?
Yeah, connecting this to the bigger picture. What's really fascinating, I think, is that most people don't actually fail at reaching financial goals because it's mathematically impossible.
Oh, okay.
They often quit because they didn't start early enough, got discouraged by the bigger numbers later, and that just assumed it was too late for them.
That it's too late trap?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But what we've seen with every single one of these scenarios is that the math, the monthly savings required, always gets easier the earlier you begin. And it's not just the compounding effect, though that's huge. It's also about what it does to your identity, how you see yourself.
So it's less about some kind of financial magic and more about a mindset shift.
Precisely. You stop thinking like someone who's just stuck on the hamster wheel.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
You start thinking and acting like someone who's actively building something valuable for their future. Freedom. Once that switch flips in your head, everything can change. You start making different choices with your money, with your time.
You prioritize differently.
Exactly. You stop chasing every little fleeting luxury maybe, and you start seeing that long-term freedom, that choice, as the real goal, the real flex, like we said, retirement or financial independence, whatever you call it. It isn't really about being old. It's about not being trapped.
Right.
You could semi-retire, you could change careers to something less stressful, you could rewire instead of retire, start a passion project.
Doesn't really matter what you do.
Exactly. What matters is that you get to choose. And when you know your number, that target, based on your desired spending, and you've seen what it takes to get there, you could stop guessing, stop feeling overwhelmed maybe, and just start moving, start building.
That really brings it home. It raises an important question for you listening right now. Freedom isn't some impossible fantasy. It really is a formula. And maybe the only thing standing between you and having that choice is deciding when you're going to start. Well, that was a truly, truly eye-opening look at what it takes to reclaim your time and really live life more on your own terms. We genuinely hope this exploration gives you a new perspective, maybe some actionable insights, or just sparks some thought. What stood out to you from today's discussion? Did any of those numbers surprise you or maybe resonate with where you are right now? We'd honestly love to hear your thoughts. Let us know. And if you found this conversation valuable, please make sure to subscribe to Marginal Thoughts for more explorations that help you navigate our complex world. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep building towards the life you truly want to live.